Japan history. Prehistory and ancient history. A Paleolithic culture around 30,000 BC constitutes the first known habitation of the Japanese archipelago. This was followed from around 14,000 BC, the start of the Jomon period, by a Mesolithic to Neolithic semi-sedentary hunter-gatherer culture characterized by pit-dwelling and rudimentary agriculture, including by ancestors of contemporary Ainu people and Yamato people. Decorated clay vessels from this period are some of the oldest surviving examples of pottery in the world. Around 300 BC, the Yayai people began to enter the Japanese islands, intermingling with the Jomon. The Yayai period, starting around 500 BC, saw the introduction of practices like wet rice farming, a new style of pottery and metallurgy, introduced from China and Korea. Japan first appears in written history in the Chinese Book of Han. According to the records of the Three Kingdoms, the most powerful kingdom on the archipelago during the 3rd century was called Yamatai-koku. Buddhism was introduced to Japan from Baekje, Korea and was promoted by Prince Shotoku, but the subsequent development of Japanese Buddhism was primarily influenced by China. Despite early resistance, Buddhism was promoted by the ruling class and gained widespread acceptance beginning in the Asuka period, 592 to 710. The Nara period, 710 to 784, marked an emergence of the centralized Japanese state centered on the imperial court in Hijo-Kyo, modern Nara. The Nara period is characterized by the appearance of a nascent literature as well as the development of Buddhist-inspired art and architecture. The smallpox epidemic of 735 to 737 is believed to have killed as much as 1/3 of Japan's population. In 784, Emperor Kanmu moved the capital from Nara to Nagaoka-kyo, then to Heian-kyo, modern Kyoto, in 794. This marked the beginning of the Heian period, 794 to 1185, during which a distinctly indigenous Japanese culture emerged, noted for its art, poetry and prose. Murasaki Shikibu's The Tale of Genji and the lyrics of Japan's national anthem Kimigayo were written during this time. Buddhism began to spread during the Heian era chiefly through two major sects, Tendai by Seiko and Shingon by Kukai. Pure Land Buddhism, Jodoshu, Jodoshinshu, became greatly popular in the latter half of the 11th century. Feudal era. Japan's feudal era was characterized by the emergence and dominance of the ruling class of warriors, the samurai. In 1185, following the defeat of the Taira clan in the Genpei War, sung in the epic tale of Haika, Samurai Minamoto no Yoritomo was appointed shogun by Emperor Go-Toba, and Yoritomo established a base of power in Kamakura. After his death, the Hojo clan came to power as regents for the shoguns. The Zen school of Buddhism was introduced from China in the Kamakura period, 1185 to 1333, and became popular among the samurai class. The Kamakura shogunate repelled Mongol invasions in 1274 and 1281, but was eventually overthrown by Emperor Go-Daigo. Emperor Go-Daigo was himself defeated by Ashikaga Takuji in 1336. Ashikaga Takuji established the shogunate in Moromachi, Kyoto. This was the start of the Moromachi period, 1336 to 1573. The Ashikaga shogunate achieved glory at the age of Ashikaga Yoshimitsu, and the culture based on Zen Buddhism, the art of Miyabi, prospered. This evolved to Higashiyama culture, and prospered until the 16th century. On the other hand, the succeeding Ashikaga shogunate failed to control the feudal warlords, daimyos, and a civil war, the Onin War, began in 1467, opening the century-long Sengoku period, warring states. During the 16th century, traders and Jesuit missionaries from Portugal reached Japan for the first time, initiating direct commercial and cultural exchange between Japan and the West. This allowed Oda Nobunaga to obtain European technology and firearms, which he used to conquer many other daimyos. His consolidation of power began what was known as the Azuchi Momoyama period, 1573 to 1603. After Nobunaga was assassinated in 1582 by Akechi Mitsuhide, his successor Toyotomi Hideyoshi unified the nation in 1590 and launched two unsuccessful invasions of Korea in 1592 and 1597. Tokugawa Ieyasu served as regent for Hideyoshi's son and used his position to gain political and military support. When open war broke out, Ieyasu defeated rival clans in the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. Tokugawa Ieyasu was appointed shogun by Emperor Go-Yosei in 1603 and established the Tokugawa shogunate in Edo, modern Tokyo. The shogunate enacted measures including buka shohado, as a code of conduct to control the autonomous daimyos, and in 1639 the isolationist sakoku, closed country, policy that spanned the 2.5 centuries of tenuous political unity known as the Edo period, 1603 to 1868. The study of Western sciences, known as Rangaku, continued through contact with the Dutch enclave at Dejima in Nagasaki. The Edo period also gave rise to Kokugaku, national studies, the study of Japan by the Japanese. Modern era. On March 31, 1854, Commodore Matthew Perry and the Black Ships of the United States Navy forced the opening of Japan to the outside world with the Convention of Kanagawa. Subsequent similar treaties with Western countries in the Bakumatsu period brought economic and political crises. The resignation of the shogun led to the Boshin War and the establishment of a centralized state nominally unified under the emperor, the Meiji Restoration. Plunging itself through an active process of westernization during the Meiji Restoration in 1868, Japan adopted Western political, judicial and military institutions and Western cultural influences integrated with its traditional culture for modern industrialization. The cabinet organized the Privy Council, introduced the Meiji Constitution, and assembled the Imperial Diet. The Meiji Restoration transformed the Empire of Japan into an industrialized world power that pursued military conflict to expand its sphere of influence. Although France and Britain showed some interest, the European powers largely ignored Japan and instead concentrated on the much greater attractions of China. France was also set back by its failures in Mexico and defeat by the Germans. After victories in the First Sino-Japanese War, 1894 to 1895, and the Russo-Japanese War, 1904 to 1905, Japan gained control of Taiwan, Korea and the southern half of Sakhalin. In addition to imperialistic success, Japan also invested much more heavily in its own economic growth, leading to a period of economic flourishing in the country which lasted until the Great Depression. Japan's population grew from 35 million in 1873 to 70 million in 1935. In World War I, Japan joined the Allies and captured German possessions, and made advances into China. The early 20th century saw a period of Taisho democracy, 1912 to 1926, but the 1920s saw a fragile democracy buckle under a political shift towards statism, the passing of laws against political dissent and a series of attempted coups. This process accelerated during the 1930s, spawning a number of new radical nationalist groups which shared a hostility to liberal democracy and a dedication to expansion in Asia. Japanese expansionism and militarization along with the totalitarianism and ultranationalism reshaped the country. In 1931 Japan invaded and occupied Manchuria and following international condemnation of this occupation, it quit the League of Nations in 1933. In 1936, Japan signed the Anti-Comintern Pact with Germany and the 1940 Tripartite Pact made it one of the Axis powers. The Empire of Japan invaded other parts of China in 1937, precipitating the Second Sino-Japanese War, 1937 to 1945. The Imperial Japanese Army swiftly captured the capital Nanjing and conducted the Nanjing Massacre. In 1940, the empire invaded French Indochina, after which the United States placed an oil embargo on Japan. On December 7 to 8, 1941, Japanese forces carried out surprise attacks on Pearl Harbor, British forces in Malaya, Singapore and Hong Kong and declared war on the United States and the British Empire, bringing the United States and the United Kingdom into World War II in the Pacific. After Allied victories across the Pacific during the next 4 years, which culminated in the Soviet invasion of Manchuria and the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, Japan agreed to an unconditional surrender on August 15. The war cost Japan, its colonies, China and the war's other combatants tens of millions of lives and left much of Japan's industry and infrastructure destroyed. The Allies, led by the United States, repatriated millions of ethnic Japanese from colonies and military camps throughout Asia, largely eliminating the Japanese Empire and restoring the independence of its conquered territories. The Allies also convened the International Military Tribunal for the Far East on May 3, 1946, to prosecute some senior generals for war crimes. In 1947, Japan adopted a new constitution emphasizing liberal democratic practices. The Allied occupation ended with the Treaty of San Francisco in 1952 and Japan was granted membership in the United Nations in 1956. Japan later achieved rapid growth to become the second largest economy in the world, until surpassed by China in 2010. This ended in the mid-1990s when Japan suffered a major recession. In the beginning of the 21st century, positive growth has signaled a gradual economic recovery. On March 11, 2011, Japan suffered one of the largest earthquakes in its recorded history. This triggered the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster, one of the worst disasters in the history of nuclear power.